There we go. Okay. All right. I'll make a few adjustments here. I do have my microphone back, so hopefully it's easier to hear me. We're going to start seated. And if you do have blocks or a blanket that might feel a little bit better in that hip structure as we're starting seated, feel free to place those underneath the buns. And we're really just trying to find a comfortable seat. If there is no comfortable seat, feel free to rest on your back, maybe your side or your belly. We can ground either seated or reclining. So sometimes the seated position gives us a little more opportunity to notice breath with this upright position, but certainly we can achieve that too if we're reclining. And thinking about breath here for a moment, if it feels good to you, maybe taking a few of those deeper inhales and those longer exhales. We can imagine those exhales settling into the weight of the body where you're connected to the floor. You might even think about breathing up the body and exhaling down the body. Once those settling breaths feel complete, just inviting the body to breathe itself. There's no effort to breath. It's nice and easy. And as you've settled in, just taking a moment maybe to notice if there's sensation that's present. Maybe there's sensation that's arising in the body. Maybe you're checking in at places, just drawing awareness or attention to a particular area to see how that area is feeling. This noticing of sensation with curiosity. And trying maybe for at least the next hour to leave those questions of how it came to be out of the equation. Gentle noticing and that kindness. What would you ask your best friend if they were trying to describe these sensations? And then bringing your awareness to that breath. And in particular, we're noticing the bottom of the rib cage on the inhale and exhale. Now, sometimes breath is traveling here and expanding that belly area, that rib cage area, and sometimes it's not. So we're not necessarily trying to get it to go anywhere. We're just bringing awareness to that base of the rib cage, the belly, and if it's helpful, you can even place a hand on that belly as you're breathing in and breathing out. And noticing of the bottom rib cage, the actual muscle of the diaphragm, that breath muscle. That diaphragmatic breathing we eventually might make our way to. All kinds of benefits to be a belly breather. Now, as you continue to notice that breath on your exhale, Maybe you increase the gentle drawing in. It very naturally feels like it's deflating on our exhale, but perhaps we can, use just a little muscle to draw in, not holding in like we're, trying to have a flat belly, but this idea of drawing in a little bit of gentleness and a little bit of support with that exhale. And notice too if that starts to tighten shoulders or if you feel tightness in any other areas of the body. If it feels like it's creating tightness, maybe let that idea of drawing belly in go for now. And throughout our practice today, with your exhale, you might bring some of that awareness, that drawing in. It really does support the torso, support the low back, and a lot of what we're doing physically. It's also a little bit of an energy lock that we'll leave for another day, but it is a way to gather some of that energy in those lower chakras. If your eyes are closed, we're going to gently blink eyes open and just start a little bit of movement here. We're going to make our way to tabletop, but there's no hurry to get to tabletop. And maybe it feels like you need a little bit of something before you head in that direction. And I mentioned maybe before I started recording class that today we're going to focus on low back and hips. So we're going to spend some time here at the beginning of class, holding a little longer when we're not so warmed up in those muscles to see if we can't get some of that connective tissue to respond, to become more pliable. And then at the end of class, we'll spend a little time after muscles have been warmed up in order to see if we can't get a little more stretch and flexibility in those muscles. But let's start here in our cat cow. So we either have palms on or fists on, protecting those wrists if you need to. When you're ready on your next inhale, we're going to drop the belly. We're going to look at the top of the mat, getting that stretch through that front of the belly and the chest. We're going to exhale, maybe gently drawing that belly in as you push the mat away, rounding the back, tucking the tail. Let's do 5 more of these. You're inhaling as you drop belly, looking up, or neutral gaze, depending on neck. And exhaling as you're tucking, rounding, spreading the shoulder blades up towards the ceiling. 4 more in your own time, because sometimes I go too fast or too slow. And just noticing how that spine is feeling today. It gives us an idea where we might want to take our practice or where we might want to be gentle and have a little bit less intensity in our practice today. When you finished off that 4th one, again, no hurry to do that. We're going to go ahead and press back into your version of child's pose. Now, for some of us, that's really hard on knees, so we might just come down to elbows and nod the chin, round the back, or if possible, we're sending hips back towards heels and allowing ourselves a little bit of release through the back. I'm going to mess around with my microphone here, so apologies if it makes a little bit of noise. If you can get that head to rest, we want the head to rest. You notice I have my head on stacked fists. Maybe my arms are reaching up towards the top of my mat and my head can be resting. You can always have a block or a blanket underneath. We'll do one more breath here. We'll rise up tabletop. We're going to swing that right foot forward. Pardon me. So we might be able to frame the foot with the hands. We might be able to bring the hands inside. Maybe that feels very intense on the front crease of your thigh. So you might have your hands or your forearms up on your thigh. For now, we're going to stay put here. I'm going to walk my back leg back just a little bit further to increase my stretch. You might do the same. You're just sending that knee a little further back. And for a moment here, we can have more of a yin idea. We're not really moving. We're getting some ideas of weight to the front of that thigh that is being stretched and opened up. And perhaps we even feel it in the hamstring of the front thigh, that right leg. Not a lot of movement here when we're not warmed up might encourage connective tissue, those tendons holding muscle to bone, ligaments holding bones together, all that connective tissue interwoven and surrounding muscle. We might get it to become a little bit more pliable. We're going to shift our weight to the back knee. If you've got blocks, you're walking them back with you. For those of us who don't, maybe we can touch the floor. If we're on our forearms, just keep it gentle here. You want to keep a bend to the knee so we don't have that backward pressure on the knee. It's not about a straight leg. It's about sensation of a stretch through the back of that leg. So we're just playing around here. You're going to see me actually straighten my leg and flex my foot. That gets me the most stretch, but maybe you're getting plenty of stretch with a soft knee. So we're just measuring by sensation here. How does it all feel? Opening up that hamstring area, maybe even the calf. We'll do 2 more full breaths here. And do check in with breath. Sometimes these stretches we tend, especially if they feel challenging, we tend to hold our breath. We're going to bend into that front knee and then go ahead, take that leg, bring it back to join the other. We're coming back to tabletop. We're going to do a little bit of that marauding bear. There is no particular way to move through this. I like to move side to side to stretch my lateral body. I might shift forward and back, just a little bit of loosening and wiggling. Nobody can see you, so wiggle as much as you want. And when you're feeling ready, we're going to bring that left foot forward. Hands can frame the foot, be inside the foot, or forearms can be on top. I'm going to lift my right leg and sneak my knee back a little bit. We're getting that sense of weight now through the right front of the thigh. Remind yourself too, there's no particular way to look. We're really honoring how our hip structure either has come to be or has always been. So some of this is about how the bones come together. And some of it is just the day. Maybe we're more hydrated, less hydrated. Maybe we did a whole bunch of hiking, or in your guys' case, maybe a little ice slipping. And we don't need to go to its deepest expression. We are going to shift the weight to the back knee. We start to walk the hands and decide how we'd like to go through that front leg. Is it straight? Is it softened? Do we want to flex the foot? That hamstring stretch. There's a little idea you can add in here. If you think about the back of your left hip, if you could press that to a wall. And sometimes it does actually, when you say it, is going to move a little bit. But this idea of pressing it to a wall might increase a little bit of that sensation of stretch. And we know stretch sometimes actually feels like resistance and tension. I think stretch has, for a lot of us, a positive connotation, and resistance, maybe not so much. Perhaps we can take those two out of it and just know it's opening up. When you're ready, shifting forward, bring your knees back to join each other. We're going to go ahead and press back into your version of child's pose. We're going to add a little twist here. So as I'm pressing back, I'm going to send my right arm underneath. Now that can be done if you're on elbows too. It looks a little bit more like thread the needle. And this idea of just letting the head and shoulder lean over to that right side, it may or may not touch, to get a little opening through the torso and the shoulder area. One more breath, and then we're going to switch sides. Left arm goes underneath, head may or may not touch. We might be on knees and elbows. A little opening here for those shoulders after supporting us in that lunge. We're going to rise back up. We've got one more set of hip openers to do here. We're going to kick our right leg straight out from us. Now, this may be a space you are on blocks, so you're holding yourself up on palms. Maybe you need a little bit deeper stretch. You might go down to elbows. If you are on elbows, go ahead and look back at that back knee or foot. If this is too intense, soften your knee. By bending that knee while you're on palms, you're going to take a lot of that intensity out of the inner thigh and the back of the knee. Always a sneaky place, this inner thigh area. When it's tight, it often creates some of the imbalances in the pelvis that also then transfer to that tight low back. If you're on elbows, rise up to palms. We're going to take that same leg. We kick it behind us across the midline over to the left side, and we're going to look at it over our left shoulder. So lots of places we may experience this sensation. I tend to range my hip. Guessing that's a little bit more about my psoas, rib cage, or some bun cheek area that feels like it is opening up or becoming maybe a little bit more pliable. We'll bring that knee back through center, marauding bear again. What feels good to wiggle around here for a second, all the way through that body. And then we're going to switch sides. Left leg will kick out, can stay soft bent knee. You could be on palms. You can go down to elbows. If you are on elbows, letting your gaze go back to the back of your mat, that helps release your neck. Noticing maybe how this side feels compared to the other. We tend to have a tighter side. Sometimes that's based on, handedness and dominant side that we use more often during the day, or could be based on injury and compensation. We'll rise up if you're on elbows, come into palms. We're going to take that leg, swing it behind us over to the right side this time, gazing over your right shoulder. Maybe a space to think about breath here. We were talking about thinking about belly breathing or that bottom rib cage. As we're opening the side rib cage, we're still inviting that breath and the expansion to happen at that base of the rib cage. But now it's traveling maybe a little bit further than just the front. When you're ready, come on back through center. Instead of child's pose this time, if we can tuck the toes and give it just a little bit of pressure, pressing hips back towards the heels while we walk our arms towards the front of the mat. Now, that can be really challenging. Maybe don't point the toes. Perhaps don't send the hips back quite as far. We're looking for a little more upper body stretch here. Trying to feel that through the arms, maybe underarm and rib cage area. Tugging those toes, gonna stretch your tendon, that big one. They're running through the arch of your foot and also stimulating some of those meridians that begin in the toes. One more breath here. And then we're going to make our way to the front of the mat. Does not have to be fancy. You could transfer through that down dog, but maybe you're just walking towards the front of your mat. We'll slowly rise up when you're ready. It can be an inhale or an exhale. Let's just do a little bit to release the front of the shoulders. In fact, I'm going to turn and face you. You'll stay facing the top of your mat. If you will, slide hands behind the low back, maybe grab hold of fingers, wrists, or elbows. Once we're here, we're going to give a little squeeze to the elbows. We're careful, though, not to arch the back. So gaze forward, squeeze those elbows, opening up that heart center. You might then look right and left. We have our tailbone maybe even slightly tucked in order to protect that low back. Then we're going to let our hands swing down by our sides, some shoulder rolls. Maybe we're rolling one at a time or together in one direction. Doesn't matter which direction. You can also shrug if that feels better, especially if you're getting a lot of feedback, meaning a lot of cracking. Let's reverse your circle. Or continue to shrug. And then I'm going to step to the front of my mat. As you are at the front of your mat, give your feet a little gaze here. Can you put about 3 fingers width between those big toes? We're going to reach our arms up. And we're going to send our right arm back and our left arm forward. So it looks like T position, but I'm gazing and twisting to the right. I'll inhale back through center. I'm going to twist left hand goes back, right hand goes forward. Now these can stay low. As you inhale through center, they could be down by your side instead of up towards the ceiling. We're going to twist towards the right. Inhale through center, exhale, twist left. One more time each side. Inhale and exhale. Inhale through center and exhale. We're going to rise up through center on your exhale. This time, reach wide, facing forward, rounding forward. We'll inhale, find your halfway lift. We might keep those knees awfully soft. We can be on thigh shins or the floor with those hands. We'll exhale into a forward fold. Arms reach wide as we rise back up. Exhale, hands come back to heart. Inhale, fingertips reach. Exhale, soft bend knees as we round forward. Inhale into your halfway lift. Exhale, release, arms reach wide. We rise back up. Exhale, hands come to heart. One more time. Inhale, fingertips reach. Exhale. Now it's always an option if shoulders are bugging you to keep everything shoulder level and below. Inhale into that halfway lift. Exhale, this time stay in that forward fold. We're going to step back very briefly into our plank. Our knees come down. From here, we're going to be rocking forward and back. Now, knees stay down for this first round, but if you want to invigorate it, you can always come up into a plank and rock forward and back in down dog. I'll show you that in just a second. This is always an option. Less intensity on shoulders, wrists. Honestly, less intensity on low back. If you want to do the next 3 rocks in plank, you're going to plank and down dog, or you can continue just as you were. Down dog, that upside down letter V. Your knees might stay fairly soft. Everyone's going to meet down on knees and slide your right foot forward. That might have to swing out or slide through. And this time we're going to rise up, pardon me, placing hands right on top of that thigh. Find your balance first. And if it feels like you're on a beam, sneak that foot out so it feels like you're on a plank. And this is a little tricky. It is a big balance move. We're going to tuck the back toe and we're going to lift that back knee. You saw me make all kinds of adjustments there. Hands can be on. Now I'm in a really deep lunge. If it feels too deep, you can always take a hop forward and stay a little bit softer through both knees. If you like, arms can reach up. We're tucking tailbone, so we're careful again not to arch back, tucking, pressing through that back heel, creating a very big balance challenge. When you're ready, we're going to bring hands down. We're going to step back into our plank or knee plank. Give yourself 3 rocks forward and back. Could be from plank to down dog, or like me here, knee plank rocking. When you come back into that last plank, everybody bring your knees down. Slide that left foot forward. Rise up to find your balance. Tucking tail, moving foot if you need to. This is a biggie. You're going to tuck your toe, lift the knee off. If that lunge is too deep, you can step in a little bit or soften that knee. And when you're feeling like balance is okay, lifting hands up into warrior 1 arms. Could also be cactus arms, so we could have those elbows bent. I am really challenging my balance by keeping looking at the screen and looking back when I don't have a lot of balance today. One more full breath here. And instead of going back down, hands come to heart, keep your gaze forward. See if you can take 1 or 2 steps to come back to the front of your mat. All right, here we go. We're going to take a nice deep inhale. Reach arms. Exhale, round forward. Inhale, find your halfway lift. Exhale, or forward fold. Sorry, don't press yet through. Stay here in your forward fold. If you can, grab a hold of your opposite elbow and do a little bit of swinging side to side ragdoll. Now, if that makes you dizzy, stay put in the center. And then we'll reach those fingers to the floor. Now we'll step back into our plank. This time we are going to go through our flow. So we're going to lower to the ground, either full plank or knees, letting elbows sweep the rib cage. We come down low, lifting into a low cobra or up dog, pressing back into down dog. Now, just a reminder, down dog could also look like you're down on knees, more like a quarter dog or child's pose, or you could be on elbows. One more full breath here. We're going to walk that right foot forward, or maybe we have to put the knee down to do that. And then we're going to cartwheel up into your warrior two. So take a little time to find this warrior two. You might bend in and out. You could press in and out, actually, with hands, finding that space you want to land. And then if you can, to fire up hips, we're going to imagine we could draw our heels towards each other. They don't really go anywhere, but that's going to fire up those leg muscles as if we could draw our feet closer together. It also takes some of the burden off of the torso. We're going to come into our side angle. So we'll bring elbow down to thigh. Now top arm is going to swing down to the mat, forward and up towards the ceiling. We're going to make some big circles. So it swings down, forward, up towards the ceiling, back towards the back of your mat. One more circle. And then decide where you'd like that arm to land. It could be overhead, up towards the ceiling, back at that back of your mat, or hand behind the thigh. We're pressing elbow into thigh, really trying to make this a little more invigorated through the rib cage, as if you could press your rib cage up towards the ceiling. We're going to rise back up into our warrior two. Hands come to heart. One big step forward. Always practicing that balance. We're going to inhale, reach fingertips. Exhale, soft bent knees, round forward. Inhale, halfway lift. Exhale, release, forward fold. Pause here for a second. Just want you to nod the head yes and shake the head no. So while we're in this forward fold, we might have soft knees. Many of us might be higher. We could even rest forearms on thighs. We just have one more flow to do. When you're ready, you're going to step back. We'll go down to the mat, either in full plank or knees and lowering. Inhale, low cobra or up dog. Exhale, press back down dog, your version of down dog. Two more full breaths here. On your next exhale, this time the left foot comes forward. We're going to plant that back foot and we cartwheel up to find our warrior two, our wiggly warrior two. So maybe bending in and out. We can press with arms in and out. Find your balance. And then, pardon me, eventually landing in that warrior two with a little bit of tailbone tuck and the idea that we could draw our heels towards each other. When you exhale next, front elbow comes to thigh. Top arm swings down to mat, top of mat, ceiling, and back behind you. Two more circles. Reaching as far as you can, as is comfortable. And then you're going to decide where you'd like that arm to land, overhead, ceiling, back at the back of the mat, or behind the back. I'm pressing pretty actively into my thigh, my elbow into my thigh, so I can feel that torso working. When you're ready, rise up into your warrior two. A little bit different here, toes turn in the same direction. Hands come to hips. When you exhale next, rounding forward. Now you can extend, you can go wider or closer here, depending on what the hip structure will allow you to do. Some of us are going to rest with elbows right above knees. Some of us might prefer to hold on to ankles or even hold on to big toes. If hands can reach the mat, you might even play around with hands reaching through those legs towards the back of your mat. Another good spot to shake the head yes and no. We'll slide hands to the crease of the thigh. Inhale to rise up. That is a little harder. We're going to heel toe our feet towards each other. And we're going to do a little bit of a hip opener in our balance. So this is always a place you can hang on to a wall or a couch or a chair. So that might be a good spot for you to move over to. Do give yourself about 4 fingers width between the toes. So today we're not going to so much worry about the arms. Hands can be here, heart center, or maybe you feel a little more balanced with your arms out. We're going to take your right leg and cross it in front of your left leg. So I'm going to leave my toes on here for a moment. And then I'm going to start to almost have a seat, like I've got my right thigh on top of my left. Now I might stay put here. I might go a little bit deeper. I might cross the ankle over and go a little bit deeper, a lot like our number 4 stretch. Just depends on balance. I might not do any of that. I might be hanging onto a wall, toes on, hands centered. One more full breath here. Then we're going to release it very dramatically. We're going to stretch everything and let the feet land. Give yourself a little wiggle. Anything that might feel a bit stuck, a little bounce. Hands at a centered space. This time the left foot crosses over. Toes might stay on. You might start to soften the knees with toes on. We might be able to lift toes, or we might even be able to send that knee out so it looks more like a number 4 stretch. Any place that challenges balance. When you're ready, that dramatic release, arms reach, legs reach. Go ahead, rock forward and back. Finding your mountain pose feet. We're going to take a moment just to observe our mountain pose. Now, for me today, I'm going to bring my big toes to touch. You do not have to do that, especially if it bugs your knees. For me, that's a bit more of a hip opener because I am so externally rotated. To turn mine in actually gives me a nice spiral stretch. Hands down by your side, and maybe even just check in with tension. Can you draw them in, shoulders into your ears, and then gently on your exhale, let them melt away. And noticing if palms facing thighs or forward feels better to you. Sometimes that's more about structure. Sometimes hands forward can feel vulnerable, and maybe today we don't want to be in that space. We'd rather be a little bit less vulnerable, a little more protected energetically with palms facing thighs. It is absolutely up to you. Our chin is parallel to the floor. A little bit of that back of the skull. If we could trace a line from our tongue, roof of the mouth to the back of the skull, maybe we could imagine we're pressing that in to a wall behind us with ease, not too much. We don't want to create all, in my case, all 3 chins, maybe just one chin, one double chin. Pausing here to notice, how are you feeling? How are sensations of the body maybe arising or subsiding? You know, sometimes we stretch something out so we have less sensation. We'll do just a few more breaths here. If your eyes are closed, we're going to gently blink our eyes open. we're going to have some choices. So before we make our way to the floor, we're going to be opening inner thighs and hamstrings. A few of us may prefer seated, so I'm going to demonstrate those first. If you know you're already not going to love hip openers in a seated position, go ahead and recline, and I'll demonstrate those second. If you happen to have the hips that agree today and the back that agrees today, and you would like to do your seated butterfly, we'll bring soles of feet together, knees drop out. You'll spend some time forward folding. If that already, does not apply to you for all kinds of reasons, have that compassion for yourself to rest on your back and let your knees drop out. Less intensity in especially the crease of the hip and the low back. So either forward folding in butterfly or reclining. I'm going to do a forward fold. So if you happen to be a visual learner, nothing has changed. You've picked where you want to be, and go ahead and stay there for the next 6 breaths. If you are in a forward fold, inhale to go ahead, rise up into a seat. If you're resting on the floor, maybe grab hold of those knees and draw them in. Staying on the floor for this next hip opener is probably wise. If you are wanting to do this in seated, I'm going to do my correct leg here, so it's going to look a little different on screen. I'm going to send my right leg straight out. My left knee is going to drop out, and maybe that foot stays closer to the ankle. Perhaps it can climb up. For me, because of hip structure, I open up just a little bit and then twist towards the leg for a forward fold. If you're resting on your back, you're drawing your right knee in. It's the right hamstring we're really opening up here. And if you choose, you could support that leg with your hands and kick that leg up towards the ceiling. So either seated forward fold, right leg straight, or reclining, right knee in or right foot reaching towards the ceiling. 6 full breaths here. Just a note, if you happen to be resting on your back and you feel a lot of tension in that head area, shoulder area from holding on to the leg, if you have a block or a blanket, that might be helpful to place behind the head. One more full breath. Those of us folding forward will rise up. I'm going to extend both legs in seated. If you're reclining, extend both legs on the mat and just take a moment. I'm going to wiggle mine around and bounce my knees. Maybe you're doing the same windshield wiper, bouncing knees as you're resting on your back. We're going to switch it out. So now left leg stays straight. Right foot has all those same choices anywhere along that line of the inner thigh. I'm going to rotate just a little bit here. If you're resting on your back, you're drawing the left knee in, maybe holding on and kicking that left foot up towards the ceiling. Folding forward, 6 breaths, no matter where you've picked to be. Maybe even a moment here as you're breathing to notice which side feels tighter or maybe has more sensation, the right, the left. We'll all begin to release and either rise back up, restacking the spine or stretching legs. Take a moment, give them a good wiggle. We are all going to meet reclining now. So as you're ready, letting yourself lower to your back, we're doing our number 4 stretch, or we're doing our twisted roots. So I'm going to demonstrate both of those. If we're doing number 4 stretch, we're crossing our right ankle over the top of the left thigh and drawing that knee in. If we're doing twisted roots, we're going to be dropping the knees to the right side, which means your left leg will cross over the top, and then we drop our knees over to the right side. That's a little deeper hip opener in a different sort of way. Both are valuable, kind of just depends on what that hip might be needing. I'm going to stick here in number 4 stretch, or in fact, even a little bit of shoelace. Maybe you're in twisted roots with your left thigh on top and your knees dropped over to the right. And checking in with breath, some of these perhaps more challenging stretches can cause us to hold our breath. We'll all begin to come out and meet with both soles of the feet on the floor and a little gentle rocking of the knees side to side. You don't have to make the same choice on the opposite side. So maybe you're better suited to choose number 4 stretch or twisted roots. At this time, if you're doing twisted roots, it's the right thigh on top. Pardon me. Or you're crossing that left ankle over and drawing it in. If you're doing twisted roots, right thigh on top, knees drop to the left. You'll see me doing twisted roots on this side. A little deeper hip stretch on this side. As I mentioned at the beginning of class, these deeper hip openers, or dipper hipper openers, deeper hip openers. Oh my goodness. These might feel a little bit deeper because we have warmed up muscles. We've fired them up, we've contracted them, we've released them. We might be able to get a little bit more stretch of the muscle itself. In general, probably not going to affect too much of the connective tissue. That would take a longer hold. But we might feel like we're a little more opened up, a little bit more pliable through those hips. We're going to come back through center and soles the feet on, a little rocking side to side. Now we're going to do hip circles. And these are really about being at ease. So this can be a little bit of a tricky one. We're going to draw knees in and our hands come either on top of knees or if it feels more supported behind the knees. And our knees are going to separate. They're going to circle around and come back together. So we're not circling together. They're actually separating and coming. Doesn't matter which way you started your circle. What we're trying to do here is use more arm strength and some pretty floppy legs to get those circles around. So think about hands moving the legs and legs being fairly relaxed, and even feet and shins are usually kind of floppy. And if you are doing those circles, go ahead and reverse your circle about 5 or 6 in the opposite direction. Little hip massage as well. We've got the head of the femur relaxing into the hip socket, and we're moving it around for mobility. When you finish that last circle, gently letting feet float to the floor. And if you will extend the legs and send your feet fairly wide. So I'm going to walk my feet out just a little bit. We want some length through the legs, some length through the front of the pelvis. If you would like to add in the arms, they might be up in a letter V, just slightly above shoulder height, or out into a letter T. And just pausing here, we're getting expansive through all of the joints of the body, our pentacle pose. But we're also inviting some of that release through the front side of the pelvis, some of the ease to settle in very symmetrically, with the legs doing the same thing, shoulders doing the same thing. And just some easy breathing here, no effort to breath. 3 more full breaths here. And we'll bend and soften the knees, bring the soles of the feet on. We're going to go into a twist. Today, if I might recommend stacked knees, a little less intense, a little bit more torso than lower body. We want it to see if we can get it to travel up the chin. So if that's okay, we keep knees stacked and we drop them to the right. So probably not going to feel quite as deep as our twisted roots. If possible, we're keeping our heart center open towards the ceiling rather than worrying about whether knees get to the floor. So more focus perhaps on shoulder blades staying on, not so worried if knees get to the floor. Part of the reason we're doing stacked knees. Getting some chest opener here too, getting this diagonal from the hip to the opposite underarm opened up through that front of the structure that tends to be quite tight for many of us. Just 3 more breaths on this side and this twist. When you exhale next, draw those knees back through center and maybe readjust so the pelvis is on. Give yourself a little wiggle. Again, if possible, stacked knees to the left, opening up through that heart center towards the ceiling. Maybe arms and shoulder blades can stay on. Don't worry if knees are touching, meaning touching the floor, touching each other. We're just letting those guys drop over to provide a little bit of this twist, really through this area of the bottom rib cage down to the hip bone. When you exhale next, returning those knees back to center. And one of two choices here, knees into chest, maybe all the way out to the underarms. Maybe you like happy baby. So perhaps soles of the feet up towards the ceiling, hanging on inside or outside of those feet with knees drawing back towards the floor. Happy baby, knees into chest, or I suppose constructive rest pose. So maybe we've just worked all that tension out of the front crease of the thighs, and you would prefer to have soles of the feet on. The feet are wide on your mat and knees drop towards each other. We'll all return feet to the floor. One more full body stretch. Legs going long along the mat, if possible, arms overhead. A few deep inhales and exhales, and then we're going to begin to work our way into our space of final relaxation. That can be any space. It does not have to look like a yoga pose. Maybe you prefer to rest on your back or your side or your belly, legs up the wall. Grab anything that's going to keep you warm. If you need sweatshirts, sweaters, blankets, socks, any props, especially if you're laying on your back. Sometimes blocks behind the knees or a blanket behind the knees can be very releasing to the low back. If it is your preference to stay in relaxation longer today, you may want to go ahead and log off. I will be bringing you back out for the end of class. So offer yourself that option. Maybe you want to stay longer and not just this 5 minutes or so. As you find yourself settling in, maybe taking that deeper inhale, that longer exhale, or a series of those, inhaling and imagining as you exhale that weight, the breath settling in. Maybe a better way to say that is the breath settling into the weight of the body. And once those settling breaths feel complete, just inviting the body to breathe itself. No effort to breath. We might invite longer pauses between thoughts. That might lead to a quieting of the chatter of the mind. We let go of all of the doing of our morning, of our hours practice. And we invite ourselves to just simply be. To be resting here in a sense of ease. And maybe even a sense of well-being. Resting in ease and well-being for the next few minutes in silence. Beginning to bring awareness back to the sound of my voice, back to the space that you're resting in. Inviting that deeper inhale, a longer exhale. Beginning to reawaken the body, maybe wiggling those fingers and toes, circling wrists and ankles. It might feel good to stretch arms overhead or to draw knees into chest. And in your own way and your own time, we're going to begin to bring ourselves up into a seated position that feels comfortable to you. And as you begin to find that comfortable seat, just pausing here to notice what might be present for you, what might be present in that physical body, what might be present in thinking mind or emotional body. And if this gesture feels okay for you, we're going to place our palms right in front of our heart center. May all be well. May all have peace. And may we all be filled with compassion and loving kindness. The light in me is honored and grateful for the light in each of you. I bow to you. Namaste. Let me turn off our recording here.